Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, The Intimacy Lab. I'm so glad you're here. You know, there are moments in a relationship when silence speaks louder than words, when absence tells a story far more complicated than presence ever could. Have you ever looked at your partner's phone not because you were suspicious, but because you felt distance? A subtle shift in how she looks at you, touches you, even how she breathes around you. In modern intimacy, what is erased says as much as what is revealed. Today, we're going to enter that delicate emotional landscape, the things she deletes immediately after every affair meeting. And this is not about suspicion. It's not about turning you into a detective. It's about understanding the language of concealment, the psychology of what we hide when we are torn between love and desire, guilt and longing. Because what she deletes isn't just a message or a photo, it's a symbol, a desperate attempt to hold on to two worlds that cannot coexist. And whether you are the man who suspects or the man who simply feels something is slipping away, this conversation is for you. It's intimate, it's raw, and it will help you understand not just what she deletes, but why. So pour yourself a glass of wine, settle into this moment, and let's begin this journey together. I want you to sit with me here for a moment, not just with your ears, but with your heart, because what we're about to explore is as much about emotion as it is about action. Have you ever felt the temperature shift between you and your partner? Maybe it's not something she said directly, maybe it's something she didn't say. Maybe it's the way her phone now rests face down on the table, how she holds it tighter when she walks away from it, or how suddenly her smile feels practiced. These are not the grand betrayals we read about in stories. No, these are the tiny fractures, the subtle cracks that can appear in a relationship when something intimate is happening elsewhere. Today, I want to help you understand what happens after those meetings, after an encounter where physicality and secrecy intersect. Not to arm you with suspicion, but to deepen your understanding of the complexity of human behavior and the vulnerability of emotional space. What she deletes immediately after an affair meeting is not just evidence, it's a reflection of her inner world, a dialogue with her own guilt, shame, desire, and confusion. You see, deletion is a ritual, it is a cleansing of sorts, and the first thing she often deletes, the messages. The text threads that carried the build-up, the anticipation, the playful flirtation, the logistics, where to meet, what time, what to wear. Those texts aren't just digital records, they are emotional footprints. Each word typed carried adrenaline, risk, fantasy, and a shadow of guilt, and when the meeting is over, those texts become radioactive to her. She doesn't want to scroll back through them, because doing so would confront her with the emotional landscape she's just walked through. So she deletes, and this deletion isn't random, it's urgent, as if wiping those words will wipe the experience itself from reality, or from your eyes should you ever glance over her shoulder. And here's where it becomes so complex. It's not always because she plans to continue the affair. Sometimes deleting those texts is her way of closing the chapter, telling herself this was a mistake, this won't happen again, this is her last time. Other times it's a tactical move to preserve the illusion of normalcy. Either way, it's a psychological erasure that helps her protect two competing realities, the one she lives with you and the one she temporarily lived with someone else. But texts aren't the only thing that vanish right after the meeting. Often before she even leaves the parking lot, she'll delete the call logs. Even if it was a quick call to confirm the location or a late-night conversation filled with heated tones or soft whispers, she knows that call history leaves traces. And it's not just about hiding from you, it's also about protecting herself from accidentally scrolling back and reliving that moment, reopening that emotional vulnerability. Why does this matter? Because the act of deleting is not simply technical, it's emotional. Every swipe, every clear history, every trash bin emptied on her phone. These are moments where guilt and self-protection intersect. She's negotiating with herself about what deserves to be remembered and what must disappear to allow her to look you in the eye again. Now, let's go a bit deeper. After the messages and call logs are erased, there's another subtle deletion, one that's less obvious but incredibly telling: the removal of photos. You see, in the excitement of those meetings, it's not uncommon for her to capture a moment, maybe a selfie in the mirror before she goes out, maybe a discreet picture taken during a stolen lunch, or in a hotel room, maybe even a photo he sent her that morning to stir her anticipation. These photos are dangerous not just because you could see them, but because she could see them. They are mirrors reflecting a version of herself that feels thrilling and shameful at once. When she deletes these photos, it's an attempt to dismantle that version of herself. She may look at the image one last time, hesitate, and then swipe it into oblivion, as if that can erase the moment itself. It's important to pause here and recognize this is not necessarily about her love or lack of love for you. Many women who delete these photos still hold affection for their partners, but they are compartmentalizing, they are managing the dissonance between their desire for adventure, affirmation, or escape, and their desire for the comfort, stability, and familiarity of you. And this is why we must look at these deletions not just as technical acts, but as emotional negotiations. Each deleted message, call, or photo is part of a conversation she's having with herself about identity, loyalty, longing, and regret. In relationships, we often focus on what is present, what she says, how she behaves, the affection she shows. But equally revealing is what she erases, what she removes in an attempt to control the narrative of her own guilt or freedom. So as we sit together in this intimate reflection, ask yourself, are there other absences you've felt? Not necessarily in her phone, but in her eyes, her attention, her touch. Sometimes what she deletes on her phone mirrors what she suppresses in her heart. And in this quiet observation, you may learn something profound not just about her, but about yourself and what you truly desire in connection: honesty, intimacy, vulnerability. Now that we've begun to uncover these early signs, the deleted texts, the call logs, and those fleeting images, let's continue. There are still hidden patterns, subtle behaviors that reveal how she manages the aftermath of an affair meeting. And as we continue to gently peel back these layers together, I want you to stay close not to suspicion, but to curiosity. Curiosity about how complexity lives inside us all. What we delete, hide, or erase is often less about deception and more about self-preservation, shame, and the longing for reconciliation between different parts of ourselves. After the texts, the call logs, and the photos are gone, what remains? The next thing she quietly deletes is her browsing history. And this is fascinating because it is less obvious yet profoundly revealing. The browsing history often carries traces of the affair that are indirect Google Maps searches for a cafe she would never otherwise visit, directions to a boutique hotel not in her usual routine, perhaps even searches for topics that reflect her anxious mind, discreet places to meet, signs of guilt in a relationship, or how to feel less guilty after cheating. These are digital footprints of her internal conflict. The moment she gets home, there is an almost compulsive need to clear this trail, as if wiping the slate clean will help her slip back into domestic normalcy, into the rhythms of shared routines, familiar spaces. But it's not just about covering her tracks so you won't stumble across them. It's about protecting her own narrative, allowing herself to believe that if she erases the history, she can erase the emotional tension that prompted those searches in the first place. This deletion is different from the others because it doesn't just cover the interaction. It covers the preparation, the curiosity, the anxiety leading up to the meeting. It reflects a deeper level of psychological self-management. She's trying to forget her own planning, her own vulnerability, her own complicity. But that's not all. The deletion ritual moves from digital space to subtle physical space. The next thing that quietly disappears is a message thread in an app you may not even know she uses, a secondary messenger app like WhatsApp, Telegram, or Signal. These platforms often become sanctuaries for secret communication because they offer end-to-end encryption, disappearing messages, or even hidden chats. She knows the casual observer won't think to look there. But after the affair meeting, even these threads become too dangerous, too risky. And so, she doesn't just delete individual messages, she often deletes the entire thread or even uninstalls the app altogether, sometimes right there in the car before she walks back into your shared life. And here again we see this dual purpose, to shield you, yes, but also to shield herself. Deleting these conversations is her way of saying, this part of me must disappear for now. And if I remove the entire thread, I don't have to scroll through it later and feel that same blend of shame and desire that it evokes. It's almost as if she's trying to create an emotional vacuum where the affair existed, removing not just the interaction, but the means of interaction itself. But you may notice this deletion in other ways. Maybe her notifications from that app stop arriving, maybe she suddenly stops opening it altogether, or maybe you just feel the absence of some unseen connection that once occupied her mind. And this leads us to one of the most intimate deletions, the one that is less technical but equally telling: scent. After the affair meeting, she is often hyper, aware of how she smells, the perfume she wore that day, the unfamiliar scent from another man's skin or cologne, even the aroma of a particular place. This deletion is not about swiping on a phone, it's about cleansing. She might shower as soon as she gets home, even if it's late, even if she normally wouldn't. She might change her clothes quickly, throw them in the laundry, or suddenly say she feels sticky or tired and needs to freshen up. And you, if you're attuned, might notice this too, that hurried dash to the bathroom, that new softness of freshly washed skin at an unusual hour. She's deleting scent because scent is one of the most powerful triggers of memory. She doesn't want you or herself to smell what happened. It's important here to pause again and recognize that these actions may not stem from a place of cruelty or contempt for you. Often they emerge from a desperate wish to protect the relationship she still values even as she strays from it. Her hurried deletions, her compulsive cleansing, these are the signs of someone who is not at peace within herself. Because if she were fully resolved, there would be no need to delete. The very act of deletion confirms an internal conflict, an unresolved tension between desire and commitment, between escape and belonging. So, what can we take from this? Not an invitation to become a detective, but an opportunity to reflect on intimacy itself. Where are the places where we hide not just from our partners, but from ourselves? What emotional footprints would we erase if we could? And how do we navigate the delicate balance between transparency and privacy in love? When we look at these patterns, texts, call logs, photos, browsing history, secret apps, scent, we begin to see a portrait not just of deception, but of struggle. A struggle between two worlds, the fantasy and the familiar, the risk and the refuge. And this struggle plays out quietly, invisibly, every time she reaches for that delete button. Every time she clears her history, every time she empties her inbox, every time she washes away the scent of elsewhere, she's trying to return to you but also wrestling with the reasons she strayed. So in this quiet moment between us now, I want to ask you, what is the energy between you and her? Not just what is visible, but what is absent. Sometimes it's not about what you see, but about what has been erased, that tells the deeper story of where your intimacy stands today. As we stay in this quiet reflection together, I want you to remember, everything we've talked about so far is not simply about technology. It's about the emotional choreography that happens when a person is trying to live in two emotional realities at once. After the texts, call logs, photos, browsing history, secret messenger apps, and sent have been deleted or cleansed, there is one final thing she often deletes that is far more subtle and yet just as revealing: her emotional availability in the immediate aftermath. This isn't something you'll find in her phone. You won't find it in her notifications or browser tabs. You'll find it in the way she's suddenly distant, or perhaps strangely tender. Sometimes, after an affair meeting, she becomes almost overly affectionate, a surge of warmth and attention that feels unexpected or too deliberate. Other times she withdraws, her mind somewhere else, distracted, lost in thought. This deletion is internal. It's her way of coping with the psychological residue that lingers after betrayal. She's deleting, in her own mind, the emotional evidence that she crossed a boundary. She's trying to regulate her guilt by overcompensating or by pulling away. You may notice this even in small gestures. She lingers in conversation where she normally wouldn't. She texts you sweet messages when she hasn't done that in weeks. Or perhaps she suddenly loses interest in your plans together, saying she feels tired, overwhelmed, preoccupied. This is the invisible deletion. She's erasing emotional distance by forcing closeness, or she's erasing intimacy altogether by retreating into herself. And this, for many men, is the most confusing sign of all, because it doesn't follow a predictable pattern. The reason this matters so much is because this last deletion is about her self-image. After stepping outside the relationship, she must now return to the version of herself she feels you expect. She may double down on being the loving partner, or she may struggle to meet your eyes, unsure how to bridge the emotional chasm that now exists inside her. And again, none of this is meant to suggest that you should suddenly see her every mood as proof of betrayal. That's not what intimacy is about. This conversation is not to plant paranoia. It's to cultivate a deeper understanding of how complicated and conflicted we human beings can be when navigating our desires, our guilt, and our commitments. There's something very human in all of this, even in the messiness. Deleting is an act of hope in some way. Hope that we can wipe the slate clean, hope that what happened can be undone if it's unseen. Hope that we can step back into a life we still value without carrying the visible scars of where we've strayed. But as you and I sit together in this space, I invite you to think about what you really want in a relationship. Is it constant reassurance? Is it control over her phone and her private spaces? Or is it something deeper, a shared honesty, a shared vulnerability that means neither of you has to delete anything to feel safe and known? You see, when trust is present, deletion becomes unnecessary. In a healthy relational space, what matters isn't just that we avoid betrayal, but that we understand and tend to the emotional reasons that lead someone to hide in the first place. Because often what she's deleting are traces of unmet needs, needs for excitement, for affirmation, for freedom, for novelty. And those needs don't disappear with the deletion. They remain quietly present, waiting to be seen, acknowledged, understood. So if you've noticed these absences, if you feel the weight of what is erased more than what is shared, ask yourself, is there space for both of you to tell the truth? Can she come to you with her longings without fear? Can you hold space for her complexity as well as your own? This is what it means to move beyond suspicion and into intimacy. And before we close, I want to leave you with this. Relationships thrive not because everything is perfect, not because there are no temptations or mistakes, but because there is openness, dialogue. Repair, the absence of deletion, is not the absence of desire. It's the presence of safety. When she no longer feels the need to delete her digital life, her call logs, her texts, her photos, her browsing history, her secondary apps, her scent, or her emotional withdrawals, that's when you No, you've created a relational space where everything is welcome, even the hard conversations, even the imperfect truths. So as you reflect on what we've talked about today, don't just look at her phone, look at the emotional energy between you. What feels open? What feels closed? What feels erased? And remember, healing happens not by forcing disclosure, but by inviting honesty. Not by monitoring behavior, but by nurturing connection. Because when intimacy is strong, trust replaces suspicion, and deletion becomes unnecessary. So as we stay in this space together, leaning gently into the complexity of what people hide and why they hide it, there's one more deletion that is deeply symbolic, though it often goes unnoticed. She deletes the calendar entries, the subtle markers of time she'd carved out for that other connection. You see, affairs aren't just spontaneous. They require planning, coordination, excuses. Time must be accounted for, rescheduled, moved around. And when she's preparing to step into that encounter, even a small block on the calendar, a lunch meeting that didn't really exist, an appointment that was never scheduled, becomes a convenient alibi. But once the affair meeting has happened, those entries have served their purpose, and so they disappear quietly, effortlessly. The deletion isn't dramatic, but it's meaningful. It's a way of erasing the evidence of time borrowed from you, time taken from your shared life. And this deletion, like the others, serves both practical and emotional purposes. Practically, it ensures that if you glance at a shared calendar or ask what she was doing that day, nothing will appear suspicious. Emotionally, it allows her to restore the illusion that her time has remained fully devoted to the life she shares with you. This is important to understand because time is sacred in relationships. It's not just about hours and minutes, it's about presence, attention, priority. When she deletes that entry, she's not only removing a technical trace, she's trying to realign with your shared rhythm, to reclaim a sense of belonging in your routine. But this deletion often leaves behind an energetic residue. You might notice that an afternoon felt unusually empty, or that a regular pattern in her day was disrupted, and then quietly stitched back together without explanation. Sometimes the clues aren't in what's missing on her phone or apps, but in how time itself feels disjointed, altered, smoothed over too quickly. And while you may feel tempted to chase these details, to ask pointed questions, to demand explanations, remember that real intimacy is not built on investigation. It's built on curiosity and dialogue. The question isn't simply where were you that afternoon? It's how do we create a space where our shared time feels honest and valued again? Now there's one final deletion that goes even deeper than time, deeper than texts, calls, photos, browsing history, secret apps, sent. It is the deletion of her internal dialogue. The stories she tells herself to justify, rationalize, or silence her own dissonance. This deletion happens inside her mind, and it's perhaps the most powerful of all, because it allows her to continue as if nothing happened. Maybe in the car on the way home from the meeting, she rehearses these justifications. It was just a one-time thing, I needed it. It doesn't mean I don't love him. It's over now, so it doesn't count. And then slowly, as she crosses the threshold of your shared space, these thoughts get pushed aside. She deletes them not because they aren't real, but because carrying them would make her too vulnerable. If she held on to them, she might cry, confess, or fall apart in your presence, and so she silences the story inside her, buries it somewhere deep where even she won't touch it. And you may sense this, not as a blatant absence, but as a subtle shift in emotional transparency. Maybe her eyes look guarded when you ask about her day. Maybe she speaks but seems to edit herself mid-sentence, carefully choosing words that won't invite further inquiry. Maybe she suddenly seems emotionally tidy in a way that feels unnatural. This deletion of her internal dialogue is a profound act of self-management. It's her way of keeping the relationship functioning, maintaining peace, and avoiding the risk of rupture. But what happens to these stories that we delete from ourselves? They don't simply disappear. They linger, quietly influencing mood, behavior, intimacy, connection. They become the background noise in the relationship, the reason why something feels just a little off, even when everything appears normal. This is why understanding these deletions matters. Not to catch her, not to expose her, but to recognize that what is deleted often points to what is unresolved, unspoken, and unhealed between two people. It takes extraordinary courage to stop deleting not just texts, calls, or photos, but also our own truths. It takes even more courage to create a relationship where such deletions feel unnecessary because we've built a container strong enough to hold honesty, even when it's messy, uncomfortable, or imperfect. So I invite you now to reflect. When was the last time you asked her not what she's hiding, but what she's feeling? When was the last time you looked beyond the surface and asked yourself how safe she feels to bring her full self into the relationship? Not just the faithful partner, but the flawed human with longings, contradictions, and conflicts. When couples truly connect, they don't need deletion, they need dialogue. And dialogue doesn't begin with an interrogation, it begins with an invitation. An invitation to speak freely, to be seen fully, to be human together. As we sit here together, still holding this delicate subject between us, I want you to feel something deeper than suspicion. I want you to feel compassion for yourself and, yes, for her. Because behind every deletion, behind every carefully erased thread or hushed moment, is a story of unmet needs, conflicting desires, and emotional fragility. And at the very heart of this lies a question: what kind of intimacy are you truly longing for? You see, intimacy is not the absence of secrets. Intimacy is the willingness to step into vulnerability together, to hold not just the polished parts of one another, but also the flawed, conflicted, shadowed parts that we're tempted to hide or delete. She deletes to protect something. Maybe it's to protect your view of her, to keep you from seeing her in a way that she herself doesn't want to be seen. Maybe it's to protect herself from guilt, from facing what her choices mean for the story she's telling herself about who she is in this relationship. Maybe it's to protect the fragile stability of the life you've built together, a life that she may not want to lose even if she strayed outside of it. But deletion is never truly clean. There is always residue, a glance that avoids meeting yours for just a beat too long. A phone placed carefully face down that didn't used to be, a rush to shower at a time when it feels out of rhythm. These are the quiet ways deletion leaves behind its traces, not in the digital space, but in the emotional field between two people. And this is where I want to leave you, not with suspicion, but with curiosity. What would it mean to create a relationship where there is nothing to delete? What would it look like to build a space where both of you feel safe enough to be messy, honest, and real? That requires a different kind of courage, not the courage to investigate, to snoop, to question every detail, but the courage to ask harder questions. To ask what she's longing for, and to ask what you're longing for too. Because often when we talk about betrayal, we talk about the person who strays. But there's another layer that is rarely discussed, the betrayal of self-abandonment that happens long before infidelity. When we stop tending to our connection, when we stop speaking honestly, when we stop showing up fully. And sometimes the deletion she performs is not simply about you. It's about the ways she's abandoned her own truth, her own needs, her own feelings that she doesn't know how to voice. This is why these conversations matter, not to point fingers, not to build walls, but to understand what lies beneath the surface of secrecy. As we come to the end of this conversation together, I want to remind you that this is about emotional maturity. It's about realizing that while you may never control another person's actions, you can always choose the quality of the relationship space you co-create. You can invite honesty, you can nurture curiosity instead of suspicion, you can ask her, not what she's hiding but how she's feeling, what she's yearning for, what she's afraid of, what she needs to feel alive, connected, and seen, and you can ask yourself the same questions too. Sometimes we forget that emotional deletion happens on both sides. You may have deleted your own vulnerability along the way, your ability to express hurt, your ability to say, I feel distant from you and I miss us. You may have deleted your own curiosity about what she's feeling, because suspicion is easier than intimacy, and control feels safer than openness. But that's not where love thrives. Love thrives in the places where we allow ourselves to be seen, fully, imperfectly, tenderly. So if you've made it this far with me, if you're still sitting here with your heart open, I want you to know this. Awareness is the first step toward repair. If you felt something shifting in your relationship, it's okay to notice it. It's okay to ask questions, not with accusation but with compassion. And when you sense that something has been deleted, not just a text or a call or a browser history, but a part of your connection, take that as an invitation to listen deeper, to speak from a place of longing instead of fear, to nurture the connection you want, not police the connection you fear losing. Because in the end, every deletion leaves a shadow, and where there's a shadow, there's also light waiting to be invited back in. So let this moment, this conversation, be a gentle turning point, not a descent into paranoia, but a movement toward truth, toward intimacy that is resilient enough to hold even the hardest truths, toward a love that doesn't need deletion because it makes space for honesty, even when honesty is hard. I want to thank you for staying with me through this exploration. You've shown courage by sitting with discomfort, by leaning into complexity, and by recognizing that the strongest relationships aren't the ones without challenges. They're the ones that can hold space for both shadow and light, for both presence and absence, for both what is spoken and what has been deleted. And as we close, I invite you to reflect quietly. What energy are you bringing into your relationship today? How can you create more openness? How can you replace suspicion with curiosity and control with compassion? If this conversation has resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Share your experience, not from a place of blame, but from a place of reflection. And if this has helped you in any way, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Intimacy Lab, and share it with someone who might need this gentle reminder too. Here's to building relationships where nothing needs to be deleted because everything can be expressed. Here's to honesty, curiosity, and courageous love.